Hello and welcome to today's webcast, Symantec NetBackup Disaster Recovery Plan and Best Practice, brought to you by Datalink. I'm Chandani McDermott. I'm part of the marketing team here at Datalink. I will be your moderator today. As many of you might have heard, Datalink recently acquired Bear Data Solution. I would like to give a warm welcome to our Bear Data customers and Bear Data employees that recently joined Datalink. We're happy to have you join us and happy that you can join us today on today's webcast. Before we begin, I do have a few housekeeping items. This webcast is designed to be interactive between you and the presenters. The webcast console you are looking at can be completely customized. You can resize and move any of the windows you have open. At the bottom of your audio console are multiple application widgets you can use. If you have questions during the webcast, please click on the Q&A widget at the bottom and submit your questions. All questions from this webcast will be captured. If you are experiencing any difficulties, please visit the webcast help guide by clicking on the question mark icon below the presentation window. The help guide covers common technical issues. Our presenter today is Michael McLain, Datalink Solution Engineer. Michael will leverage his experience as a day-to-day backup manager for a very large financial company and will cover practical and field-tested input as well as lesson learned. I would like to turn this presentation over to our presenter. Michael, please take over.
Thanks, Chandani. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for taking time out of your day to attend Tech Tuesday. I'm just going to run through some NetBackup disaster recovery best practices, some things that I've encountered over the past, and hopefully this will be good for newbies as well as for savvy veterans of using NetBackup. Topics we're going to cover today are going to be kind of NetBackup architectural considerations, things, a way to design your NetBackup environment for handling the catalog replication, just making sure you're good for recovery. Also kind of things in preparation for a disaster recovery, what toolbox items you will need, and as well as how to find where your data is at. And then also, whether you're doing an on-site or off-site disaster recovery test or in real life, some of the things that I've encountered over the years with NetBackup and just best ways to save you time when you're trying to get the data back as fast as possible to get these applications up and running. So for our NetBackup architectural topics, we're going to talk about just basic catalog backup configuration. We're going to go over the replicating the catalog, if you choose to do that, NetBackup DR, as well as NetBackup clustering. So basically, the NetBackup catalog contains all the information the history of backups that you've done for all your servers. The important information in the catalog itself contains your policy information, image database, jobs, vault information, also your media information, license keys, etc. You can take a look there for Unix as well as Windows, what information does get captured in here. One of the most notable missing information would be your NetBackup bp.conf, include exclude lists, your volume manager configuration or vm.conf, as well as if you're running a Windows NetBackup master, your registry information that's stored under the current version config in the registry. So one of the things I wanted to go through here, if you haven't reviewed your NetBackup catalog information, is to find out actually what your current config is set to. So from the admin console, if you just click on your master server at the top, you can choose Configure Catalog Backup. What that will do is bring up another screen here, and that will show you what policies, one or more, if you've defined as your catalog backup policy. If you do not have one listed there, then it would be best to create a new one depending upon your configuration in your environment. Once you've determined the name of the catalog backup, you can go to your policy information and double-click on that policy to open up the configuration window. And you should note that the catalog backup should be of type NBU catalog. Now, the full backup and differential backups, these can vary depending upon your environment. My recommendations are to do a daily full catalog backup, as well as incrementals at least every 6 hours, all dependent upon what your recovery point objective is. And for retention, 1 to 2 weeks. Generally, you're not going to roll back your catalog any further than that. Hopefully, otherwise you've just pretty much lost a bunch of backup information. But that's generally my recommendation. Now on the third tab, which is your disaster recovery tab, there's kind of some important information in here. One will be a path where the catalog backup image header gets written to. This should be somewhere that's stored off your master server, so a CIFS or NFS mount path is preferred. And then the email address field, I recommend, if we can, put it, depending upon your information management risk guidelines, put that stored at least off-site, or if you do have a reliable email infrastructure, you can put it to your internal company email. That's going to contain pretty much everything that you need in order to recover your NetBackup catalog. So if for some reason you lost your site and you don't have your email, you're not going to know where your catalog's at. So definitely important. And then for the catalog policy, or for the critical policies, recommendation, you can put here some of your most important applications, whether it's Exchange or anything that's or database type stuff. So you know, hey, these are the policies, and this is where my data resides on any given catalog, on backup tape or disk. So regarding the catalog backup, I usually set up storage lifecycle policies so that if I'm writing it out to disk first, I at least replicate it to tape. I recommend definitely having more than one backup copy, and specifically storing one off-site, depending upon what your setup is. As also some of the configuration files that aren't captured with the normal catalog backup, I do recommend a file system backup of your master server. Now, another method for ensuring high availability of your catalog is to do catalog replication. You can use array level or volume level mirroring. For Unix, it would just be the user OpenV directory, and then Windows would just be pretty much your program files Veritas directory or Veritas NetBackup. And you could use that just for a site-to-site or within your data center itself to ensure a secondary copy. One of the things is just to maybe have a standby server as well as, but it needs to have the same version of NetBackup and the same host name as the master. A new method that Symantec came out is called NetBackup DR, which is auto image replication. Now this one's kind of a full suite of disaster recovery capabilities. Not only are you able to replicate the catalog, but you can also replicate the data. Now, it's not true replication of the catalog. What happens is that you, based upon your disk storage pool, the backup image gets written to, say, pool A. The data, the image itself gets replicated to a secondary pool, and then your standby master will actually do an import of that image on the secondary storage. And so if you ever had an issue with site A, you could fail over to site B, and everything's ready to go. So it's pretty much a complete package, and you can do one-to-one, one-to-many. It's pretty slick technology. And also NetBackup is able to integrate with various clustering software, whether it's Microsoft Cluster Service or Veritas, HP Service Guard, or the IBM HACMP. You can have a high availability master. Generally, when you do that, you're going to set up NetBackup when you install it in cluster mode. Taking a standalone to move to cluster will take some professional services, but it does allow for automatic failover of NetBackup. And if you have the checkpoint restart selected in your policy, backup job should resume from the last point at which NetBackup was, or where the checkpoint happened on the job. At this point, if we could just do a little user feedback for a poll, I'd be interested to see how often does your company perform disaster recovery tests, whether it's of NetBackup or the application. Probably give you 30 or 60 seconds.
want to mention if they can click on that radio button next to the response on the screen there.
All right, let's take a look at the results here. Okay, it looks like quite a few of you do it annually, and some of you haven't done it in quite a while. So hopefully this can be, somewhat of a wake-up call to realize that you do need to go through some disaster recovery testing to make sure that you can bring things back. Because as the backup administrator, you're going to be probably the front and last line of defense. So with that in mind, let's move on to some topics where we can show you things on how to prepare for a disaster recovery test or a real emergency, and move on from there. So for disaster recovery prep, we'll go through a couple of toolbox items that every NetBackup administrator should have set aside. Also, ways to go ahead and search for backup data, depending upon where the images are at, what disk or tape, and as well as trying to figure out recovery priority. So some of the disaster recovery scenarios that you need to plan for is just loss of a master server, which we kind of covered a little bit in the last topic, how to prepare for that, but also how to prepare for a loss of the data center and personnel. Documentation and things that you put together should be able to be written in a way that a general administrator could recover it, because you never know if you're going to be around or if the building's going to be around, et cetera. And both a hard and soft copy should be stored on-site and off-site. If your data center goes down and you've stored all your DR documentation on a file share, and that goes down, how do you access it? So some of those things, just to keep a hard and soft copy near you at all times, is recommended. The first thing that you're going to need after you install the NetBackup software is going to be a license key. It always wants the base NetBackup license key. So the quickest way to get that is from your admin console, is you can go to the help area and select license keys. And then you will see down, if you scroll through the list, you'll see one of the features listed as base NetBackup. And so you can capture that one, which may cover one or multiple items or features, and you can export that to a text file to save at any time. The other thing that you're going to need is a full installation of NetBackup, and you can download those at any time from the File Connect Symantec site. The one thing you will need is the serial number that's located on your license certificate, and that should get you whether it's the NetBackup 7.5, 7.6, whatever your current version of NetBackup is. The other thing to keep in mind, not only do you need the full version of the software, you will need to have access to whatever patches are currently available or that you've applied to your master. Included in the software download should be all of the NetBackup manuals in PDF form, but most of the important ones that I've relied on in the past is the NetBackup Troubleshooting Guide. Has an entire section on disaster recovery, as well as just basic network troubleshooting and obviously all the status codes that we've come to know and love. The NetBackup Installation Guide, just in case the person who's doing the install isn't as familiar with NetBackup. And then the Device Configuration Guide, if the site you're recovering from has different tape hardware than what you had been using. So just know ways to get that up and running. Now, back when we did the catalog backup configuration, we set aside a catalog or an email address. Well, what we're going to go through here is kind of what actually is in that catalog email. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it, but the one thing you'll notice in there is an attachment, and it contains a NetBackup image header. And when you do a catalog recovery, this is the first thing that NetBackup's going to ask for. That same image header is also stored in the file system that we laid out, whether it was the NFS or CIFS file share, and so there's 2 copies always stored if you filled that out in the policy correctly. But this is where NetBackup knows how to recover your media. Also, later in the email, you will see it'll list out every image that it used for the catalog backup, whether they're full or incrementals, and then where they're at. and then it'll also remind you where the DR file is written to. And another great thing about the catalog email is it gives you step-by-step instructions on how to recover NetBackup. You want to expand on those for your particular environment, but it provides a great base for you to be able to do that. Another thing to have in the toolbox is who your support provider is, whether it's Datalink One Call or Symantec. Have that information handy. For Symantec, I know you're going to need your the VSN or the ID. And definitely for an emergency, you call support right away and open up a P1 ticket. Priority will be given for your situation. But if you're going to do a DR test, I also do recommend having just a ticket open with support, giving them a heads up, hey, we're going to be doing a test. And also it's one where you've got a ticket log, so you're not having to wait in a queue depending upon your provider. But and they can help you just in case you run into issues during the recovery. So the next thing is, all right, I'm going to be doing a disaster recovery test. And sometimes you'll get a listing, maybe for your particular DR test, you're going to be doing one or more applications, whether it's a large database or Exchange or different things. And you need to know what tapes, if possible, do I need to send off site. Well, the method I found to be very good is if you go to the catalog section in your admin console. By default, it'll be under Verify, and you get a listing. You can select Media ID. And from there, you can choose which copy you want to choose from, whether default is primary. Now, it depends on what your setup is. If you're backing up to disk first and duplicating to tape, or just you got to have an idea of which copies you're looking for that maybe you need to send off site or send to your recovery location. But you can browse there and then set your date range depending upon what the recovery date is. And then once you hit search, you'll be given a listing of backup IDs, and they'll be separated out by a policy name and the schedule. And then off to the right, you will see a listing of one or more media IDs if you're looking at tape, as far as which ones that you would need to send off site. And you can copy and paste any of that stuff to Excel file or a text file just to keep track. But if you do see media ID that is set to with an @ sign, then those images were written to an optimized storage disk. Now that's searching for the images via the GUI. If you have a lot of clients that you need to search, there is command line ways that you can do it. The one I found to get this data is using the BP verify command, and pretty much using the -local with the host, and you will get pretty much the same printout that you got on the GUI, and it'll give you one or more tapes. You can capture all that data and then be able to put together a good, clear, concise list of tapes that you do need to have available for your test. Make sure to choose whether or not it's going to be the primary copy, or if you're going to be copy 2, copy 3, etc. So in a recovery priority, one of these things where, depending upon how your company is set up, you may be the disaster recovery coordinator, or you have a team that's set aside to be able to do that. And they're pretty much going to dictate the order of applications in which they're going to be recovered. And that's something that should definitely be settled ahead of time. But as soon as recovery is needed, you're going to have every application team coming at you saying that they have the highest priority to get their data back. So some of these things need to be set aside, and you can work with your infrastructure teams as well as any coordinator to make sure that a priority is laid out on what order that applications and components do need to be recovered. So now we've got another poll question. Do you have a secondary site available to recover your data? So I'll give you a couple seconds here to answer that. Okay. Yeah, it looks like a great majority of you do, and that's good. I know it's dependent upon the size of your shop. Sometimes you don't have that capability, but obviously that's the best way, or at least storing the data off-site is a good first step. So, well, now that we've kind of covered things to prepare for, or things to include, let's kind of go through once it's time to actually do the test, what are some of the things that we're going to encounter with NetBackup. So kind of walk through the catalog recovery process here, some of the things, whether or not we need to clear tape and robot devices, policies, media, and some of the pitfalls and things that I've ran into over the years. So the first thing you're going to do if you have a disaster and you get NetBackup installed is you're going to perform a catalog recovery. This one is just going to go through the command line. It might be a little bit of an eye chart with that screenshot there. But in reality, you're going to issue a BP recover space minus wizard, and you will get a bunch of prompts. And the first prompt is going to be for that image header, the disaster recovery file. That's either in your email attachment or on the file location that you specified in your catalog policy. And pass the most current one that you want to recover with, and it will then go through and validate that the media listed in there is available to do the recovery from. And it'll give you, do you want to recover just the databases, or do you want to do a full recovery? And just pretty much you would be doing a full recovery. And it goes through, it will recover pretty much all the image database information first, and then the relational databases after that, EMM, NBDB, etc. This can take however long it took you to back up your catalog. So do need to plan for that. If it takes you an hour to back it up, it's probably going to take you at least an hour or so to recover the catalog. Now, if you're going to do this through the GUI, basically from the main NetBackup admin console screen, if you go down to the bottom, you will see a section there that says Recover the Catalogs. And you'll get a pop-up window, and it's pretty much a recovery wizard that will walk you through. And the first thing you do is specify the path name to the disaster recovery file. And then we'll go through and make a determination if all the resources are there. In this case, fortunately, they are. And then you do get your option whether to recover the entire catalog or a subset of the databases or images. So here we're going to recover everything. And you'll just get a process going through here, give you a log file containing every item that it is recovering. And at the end, you should get a success that the catalog has been recovered, and that nothing will run pretty much until you do a NetBackup restart. So now that we've got the recovered catalog, this section is going to be dependent upon if you're doing a DR test at a remote site. Your tape hardware is probably not going to be the same as what you're using at your primary site. There's a couple different ways to clear the device config. You can start NetBackup up and go through each tape drive or robot. I've seen that take quite a bit of time depending upon timeouts and what media servers you're bringing back to recover. So my preferred method is from the command line, and this can be done on Unix or Windows, and it's just the nbemm command, delete all devices, delete all records, and it's a real quick command. It will wipe out pretty much all that config from the EMM database. Your media and everything is intact, so it's only pretty much robot devices and tape drives. And then stop and restart NetBackup, and then we can proceed with adding the new devices. Once you start up NetBackup, it's going to be in from a catalog recovery, it's going to be in the same state that you were in when it was last backed up. So depending upon the current time or system time that you're doing this, policies may start firing up, and that's probably the last thing you want to have going on when you're trying to recover things. So there's a command line you can do to suspend scheduling using the nbpemrec command. This is not persistent within restarts of NetBackup, so you have to be mindful for that. But the best way really is to go to your policy screen, select all policies, and deactivate them. And depending upon the number of policies, it can take a little bit, but and once you have that, the next thing we can do is reconfigure your tape devices. And this can be done via command line or wizard, just highlighting the wizard here. So for the top one would be for storage devices, it would be physical robots and tape. And then your disk storage servers would be for your NMSDP pool or other OST vendor. Now, as far as inventory and media, this is one of the things I've encountered pretty much every time have performed a disaster recovery test, is that even if you've deleted the robots and devices, the NetBackup media are still shown, or at least the configuration shows that they still belong to a robot. And the first thing, once you've re-added a new robot, new drives, is you're going to inventory a robot. Well, the error you're probably going to get is not unique barcode. Because the barcode exists, but it's maybe in a different robot or not unique. So the one thing that we have to do is to actually move logically in NetBackup, move these tapes to standalone. It doesn't mean ejecting them or anything like that. It just tell NetBackup that these tapes are no longer in a library, and then we can do a robot inventory from there. So to do that, pretty much from the media section, what I've done, or what I usually do, is go and take a look on the media column for robot type, and would depend upon your robot, whether it's TLD, TLH, etc. Just sort those media, and then any that don't say none, to right-click on that, choose Move, and then you'll get a pop-up screen of all the media, and leave the robot, or leave the volume is in a robotic library unchecked, and then leave the volume group blank, which pretty much means standalone. And then hit OK. Depending upon the number of media densities, you may get one or more pop-ups, but in the end, you want to have all your media set to none. And once you've reached that point, then you can do your standard robot inventory with your DR robot, and everything should be fine. So the one common thing I've had, or issues that I've encountered with pretty much every disaster recovery test, deals with network and DNS. DNS is not always available when the master server is brought up. Sometimes they're still working on it, or it's just lower on the priority list. So one of the things you have to may have to is edit your local host files, whether it's Unix or Windows, just to set up any clients or new media servers until DNS gets working. And sometimes it differs than what is in prod, so you may rely more on the host files. But just something to keep in mind when you are going through that. The other thing is NetBackup and its host caching. I think starting in 7.1, there was a different method as far as how NetBackup gathers the IP information, instead of using the get host by name or get host by header. So it does store some of this information in a cache directory. And depending upon how you've recovered it, whether it's replicated a catalog or something, this cache directory or cache information may differ in the test DR than your production DR, and can cause problems with just host communication. So it is best to run the clear host cache to kind of get that information out of there, and then to repopulate just the machine that you're on using the BP client command, but bpcl ntcmd -self should go out there and repopulate that with the current host name and IP address of the server that you're on. The other one is system date. And this depends on how you choose to do it, or how the system administrator set up the environment. Some users will set the RPO date, or set their systems to the RPO date that has been preset assigned as far as the recovery point. Others will use the current date and time of when you're doing the test. The issue there is that if you're using the current date and time and your recovery point was 2 weeks ago, you could run into an issue where NetBackup is going to expire images, and that may or may not ruin your disaster recovery test. So to do that, to prevent that from happening, NetBackup has a touch file out there that you can create called No Expire. It goes under the NetBackup bin directory for both Unix and Windows, and it will prevent the automatic expiration of images. If you were to manually run a BP expedite or expire one, that would still work. It doesn't prevent that, but it does prevent the automatic expiration of those. Regarding alternate media servers, maybe you have 5 or 10 media servers in your production environment, but you're only going to be using 2 or 3 for your data recovery at your test. Well, depending upon how the images were backed up, by default NetBackup will use the media server that did the backup. So in order to make use of less media servers, there is a media host override option that you can set through the GUI, or if it's in the bp.conf, you can use the force restore media server option as well. But the idea is you set the original source name and then the media server that's at your DR facility, and the recovery images should flow through there. Now, one of the other issues I've encountered, depending upon the VMware environment, and if you're using NetBackup for VMware capabilities or Hyper-V, is that going through the recovery GUI can be time-consuming. May take 5 minutes or so, or 10 minutes for each VM that you want to do a recovery on. And if you're in a hurry for a true disaster and you've lost a dozen VMs and you need them back, time is clicking there. So Symantec did introduce a command line option to restore virtual machines in 7.6 called NV Restore VM, and I've tested this out. It does work great. You submit the VM that you want to recover, and it appears in the activity monitor right away. You can also create a rename file if your DR site does not match your production site as far as data stores, ESX servers, etc., that you can put together and submit that as part of the restore. There's a whole tech note 91739 that is available from Symantec's website that kind of details more about it. As I said earlier, when you get into a disaster recovery test, network's going to be one of the big things that you're going to be troubleshooting. And the one command I've found that works the best for me is called bptest bpcd. And you specify the host name, and then I use the -debug as well as -verbose. It kind of gives me the full log output and everything that's going on with that communication, whether it gets hung or what kind of issues are going on there. And this command is only available on master or media servers, but I've found that it's invaluable to trying to figure out what is going on the communication end, whether the client doesn't know how to reverse look up the IP of the media server or can't talk, or if there's multiple interfaces. So this one I've found has been very helpful. And then other things for troubleshooting network connectivity, we talked about earlier, the BP client command, bpclnt-cmd with a -pn option. What that does is it'll do a peer name lookup from the master, and it pretty much says, if you run this from a client, it'll ask the master, okay, who am I? And the master will report kind of output in three or more columns. You will get the first host name, which will come from a DNS lookup or a local host file. And then the second host name will be how it is defined in the backup policy, if it is. And then you'll get the IP address that was used, that was outbound from the client. And more information, a lot more information you can be found in TechNote 501.98 covering that. But that's one I've used many, many times. And then along with networking, depending upon what the config setup is, sometimes NetBackup is sluggish just to get through the startup processes. And that can be network timeouts or inability to communicate with media servers, etc. So if you are encountering that when you're bringing up NetBackup, it's kind of time to take a look at your local network config. And it may not be readily apparent what the issues are. Just to do a quick replay of the last 5-minute run of the logs, you can use a VX log view -P 51216 for NetBackup, and then a -T with the 5 minutes there, and it'll replay, just output the last 5 minutes and kind of scroll through there to see what might be hung up as it can't start the database or some other hostname conflicts. And if you have dealt with some hostname reconfiguration issues, when you stop and restart NetBackup, the PBX process, or Private Branch Exchange, does not restart upon a NetBackup restart. So once in a while, I've had to restart that manually, and that has cleared things up. So for the most part, it can stay up and running, but I've found that restarting that once in a while, when everything else looks like it's good, restarting that has fixed some issues. So something to keep in mind. And pretty much in closing for the presentation, with any disaster recovery test, preparation and documentation are key. The catalog backup email is going to be your best friend for this. It's going to contain everything that you need, and even as we've covered earlier, provide you the steps to bring back the information in the catalog. Annual DR tests are recommended, if not more frequent, but it also helps if you're changing out personnel or putting in new equipment, making sure that the documentation is ready or up to current. For a couple other things on DR tests, always bring some extra backup tapes. If the full backup image is more than a week old, that's fine. A lot of these recovery tests, you're bringing back an application, and then there's application testers waiting to do testing on the application. And if you don't have the data tapes there to bring back their app, there's not a lot more they can do. So it's the onus on you to make sure that we can at least at some point bring back that application. So always send more than you need. And another thing is if you're restoring file systems to a Windows or Unix system, always check with the sysadmin whether they want you to overwrite it or not. You don't want to run into a spot where they've set up custom new, etcfs tabs or something, and you overwrite all that, and they've got to redo their whole config. That's never a fun time. So with that, I know we've got some questions and answers out there, but I do appreciate you joining me today for this presentation, and hopefully you found it beneficial. So, Chandani, I'll throw it back to you.
Thank you, Mike. Just to mention that, thank you for attending today's Tech Tuesday. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them in. We do have folks on the other end answering questions. This webcast is offered every third Tuesday. If we do send them invitations out through the email. If you know of anybody who would like to be on, let us know. If you have any ideas or suggestions for future Tech Tuesday, please submit them to techtuesday@datalink.com. This webcast is also recorded, so you will receive a link from On24 within 2 to 3 days to listen to it. And then there was a few requests for presentation. We will review that and make sure that we are able to submit those to you. All right. Chet or Brad, were there any questions we should address to the group? You guys still on?
I think Chet dropped off. There is one here, or I guess there's probably a couple. There's a mixed environment with majority of our jobs going to data domain. Should we move catalog backups to tape? This is one of the questions.
Well, for the for mixed environment, it depends on where the catalogs are at. I mean, most, if you've got a data domain, you're going to be sending the backups there, primarily just to get it done. And it depends if you're replicating that. The idea is to have more than one copy. If you can have it off-site, that's the best. So Most of my customers, if they have a mixed data domain where there is tape, I do put the primary copies on the data domain and then replicate it off to tape. But if that's not possible, then at least maybe if you're worried about the stability or you want to have a secondary copy, you can always duplicate that out to a NFS or CIFS type file share just to have a secondary copy. And the same thing would go for NetBackup appliance customers. If you've just got the one appliance and the MSDP pool is on there, the recommendation would be if you're going to write it to the MSDP pool, great, but I'd also recommend trying to duplicate that out to a secondary storage, whether that's tape or a regular file share.
Have you heard anything about recommended size limit for images on the master server?
I think Symantec doesn't recommend catalogs getting over a terabyte. I know that kind of depends on what the image retention is. And for catalogs that do get larger than that, there are other ways to do backups, whether that's utilizing some storage that has its own snapshot capabilities at the array level just to prevent corruption. Generally, I think Symantec doesn't recommend catalogs getting over a terabyte, but that's not always practical.
Here's another. Do we replicate our DD to an offsite DD? And I'm not sure what that means.
I think that was just Rob saying that they do replicate to an offsite unit, so that you have another copy of it. We do have a question from Brian. Have you ever had to recover from an offsite catalog backup, and how long did the full recovery of NetBackup take?
And yes, I have. And it really, the recovery is going to take probably the same amount of time as it took to do the original backup. Maybe just depending upon what the tape speeds and feeds are of the disaster recovery environment. But if it took you an hour to back it up, it may take an hour to restore.
All right. There's a few more questions then. Do you want me to read them, Mike, or do you want to? If sending a catalog to a data domain, do we need to share or use basic disk for the catalog backup, then use data domain replication to get a second copy of the catalog?
Yeah, I mean, it's the idea. Basically, I mean, you can use the data domain or you can use basic disk. I mean, the whole idea is making sure you have more than one copy. Basic disk is definitely going to be ensure that you're going to have access to that data. But yeah, you can replicate from a primary and secondary site with the catalog. But always having just a flat file, whether you're not dealing with an OST or deduplication, is probably going to be the safest. But yeah, you can certainly replicate with the data domain as well.
Okay.
Yeah, it looks like that was more of a statement. From
yeah.
There's probably one here from Kevin, though. If you have a 1 terabyte catalog, what are the recommended methods for backing them up?
Sure. And that does going to get into what's the underlying storage that you have for that catalog. I've had customers that have well over a terabyte catalog backup, and they've used just array level methods, whether it's taking a snapshot of the catalog. It may not be the databases and the images may not be at a perfect consistent point in time, but something's better than nothing. But definitely getting point in time backups, whether it's snapshots or using a PVOL SVOL type split, just making sure that you can bring that catalog back is the important part.
Looks like they were all answered already. So, all right. So, I'd like to thank everyone again for joining today's presentation. This should conclude our call. So, have a good rest of the day. Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Brad and Chad, for answering those questions.
Yep. Thank you.